Welcome to episode 58 of the Necronama.com. But first, a word from our friend, author Brian Kirk.
Hey everyone, my name is Brian Kirk, and I'm an author of psychological horror. You might know me from such books as Will Haunt You and We Are Monsters. My latest creation is actually something a little less dark and scary and a little bit more soft and cuddly, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. I've actually gone and created the world's first and only pillow built for the beach. If you're a beach lover like me, you've probably noticed there's nothing to lay your head on. You go out there, you roll up a towel, you bunch up a shirt, you pile up some sand, and it's just not as comfortable as it should be. So about a year ago, I went to go buy a beach pillow, just figuring that would be more comfortable, and I came to the shocking realization that they didn't exist. So I spent the last year creating one. Today, July 13th, I'm actually launching this website, www.ballastgear.com. And that's where you can find the Ballast Beach Pillow, the first of its kind. Thanks so much. Enjoy the show.
I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and my own brother is a goddamn shit-sucking vampire.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. And this was one of those movies when I watched as a kid. I wanted to be a vampire, but then, I didn't see all the benefits in it from this movie. Other movies that were definitely some, but this one, not so much.
Joining us today, against her better judgment, is Sadie Hartmann.
Hi.
Sadie, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get into who you are for our listeners and stuff, I want to take a quick second to tell people this show probably wouldn't be what it was without you. And I don't know if you're aware of this, so you might be hearing this for the first time as well. Basically, January of last year, I told Don, hey, we should work on this again, because we'd been kind of talking about it. And I get nervous and I push things off and I find excuses not to do things, right? And we kept talking about it. And we met at like a couple cons and we were like throwing ideas, but I would always find reasons not to work on it. And then one day, Nightworms wanted to use my book in one of your packages. Thank you very much. And so there was suddenly this deadline, right? And I was like, well, there's no better place to advertise the podcast. So we need a first episode out before that goes out to people. And so you literally gave me a deadline to make this show happen. And it is honestly, and Don can 100% vouch for this, my happiest time in life right now is when we're recording this show. So thank you for pushing me in the right direction, whether you meant to or not.
Aw, I love that. I do. I love that because I think all of us need extra motivation sometimes. And I don't think we're always like really aware of why we're procrastinating on something we actually really want to do. And it might just be this like underlying fear or anxiety that we're struggling with. And then just to have like a friend come along and nudge us in the right direction is like so valuable. So I really love that.
Yeah, I really wanted to say that to you, and I thought this was a better place than an email. So with that said, would you please introduce yourself and tell our listeners a bit about yourself and Nightworms and everything else you have going on?
Sure. I am Sadie Hartmann, also known as Mother Horror on social media. Sometimes it's hard to say the Mother Horror. Some people think I'm saying Mother Whore, and I don't want to be Mother Whore. I much prefer my normal title of Mother Horror. I am called that because I am a lover of horror fiction, indie and mainstream. I take photographs of my horror collection on Bookstagram, so you can find me there as Mother Horror. I also review horror fiction for Scream Magazine publication in the UK, as well as Cemetery Dance Online. And I write articles and do interviews for Tor Nightfire and Lit Reactor. And I am the co-owner of a horror subscription service called Nightworms. So that's a little bit about me.
I, for one, absolutely love everything you and Ashley have been able to do with Nightworms, whether it's creating cool packages or it's helping authors gain access to new audiences. Even the fun I have watching the Bookstagram posts or the YouTube channels as people unpackage the latest Nightworm's arrival. While there's like extra goodies, the focus is on the books.
We used to rep for a company, both of us did, that shall not be named. It was the horror subscription service that came before us that set the precedence of what not to do. So we both repped for that company, and we would get these boxes full of, basically like stuff you don't want in your house, like just shit, actually. I remember this one package in particular, the theme was like through the woods or into the woods or something, and they even included like a plastic compass. And I was like, what am I going to do with this stupid compass? Like I ended up giving a lot of the stuff that would come in the packages like to my kid. And so when we made our own service, we thought everything in this package should 100% be to enhance the reading experience and then just be something that like people would want to keep, like bookmarks or stickers or postcards for upcoming books that would act as like a reminder for them to pre-order it or order it when it comes out, or like a hot drink, a hot beverage. We use like coffee and tea and hot chocolate and stuff like that. And so really just like one-time use stuff or collectible stuff, just so it's not laying around afterwards. Like nobody has room for that. You just want the books.
Exactly. So you chose The Lost Boys, and I hadn't seen this in so long. It was almost like watching it for the first time, except I knew everything that was going to happen. But it had really been that long for me. And I want to know, why The Lost Boys?
Yeah, so this movie is really important to me. If I could pick a movie that has all the boxes ticked for me, it would be The Lost Boys. It was the first horror movie that I ever saw in a theater. I was absolutely terrified to go. I read a lot of horror fiction, but I don't watch a lot of horror movies. I actually have like several stories of times where I went to a sleepover and everybody decided to watch a scary movie. So I would call my parents, like sneak off into a bedroom and call my parents and have them come and get me. So this particular instance, I was staying at my friend Rebecca's house, and we were in 7th or 8th grade. And her brother had been tormenting us like all day. He was an older brother. He would like do this thing where he would fart in a jar and then like run up to us and like pour the farts in our faces, if that makes sense. And he was like doing stuff like that to us all day. We were totally exasperated with him. And Rebecca's mother came home from work and she said, we're going out for pizza and we're all going to go to a movie. And I was so excited because my parents, didn't take us to movies quite often. So then I'm like, what are we seeing? This is like in the car on the way. What are we seeing? Oh, we're going to see this new horror movie called The Lost Boys, and you guys will like it because, there's a lot of cute boys in it, blah, blah, blah. I was terrified. If I could have called my mom, I would have. Like, I just was shaking. And then we got in the theater. Everybody's having a good time eating popcorn and like opening their candy and everything. And I just was like sick to my stomach thinking this was going to be something that was going to give me nightmares. It was going to be horrible. And I just ended up loving it. I loved every minute of it. I thought it was like the best movie I'd ever seen. I've seen it like 100 times since.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what about you, Don? Is this one that you watch a lot, or is it 20 years in between like me, or what?
No. Not even close to 20 years in between. I'm sorry, not as far as that. I saw it not in the theater when it came out, but probably on video or something. It was kind of one of those movies I saw in the summers when I would spend it with my cousins, and we would watch it, and then it would be on HBO or Showtime, and you just happen to catch it while it's on. And strangely enough, when I proposed watching it, have my wife watch it with me. She was like, the Lost what? I was like, The Lost Boys. Corey Haim, Corey Feldman, vampires, Kiefer Sutherland's in it. And she's like, I've never seen that movie. And I went into the full, you haven't seen The Lost Boys routine, where I was just like, I can't believe, of all horror movies, like, you haven't seen this one. So when we watched it, I probably ruined it for her because there were parts that I was laughing at, which I'll point out when we talk about it now, that I was laughing at, which made no sense to her as to why they were funny. And 9 times out of 10, it had to deal with the grandpa as far as why I was laughing so hard.
He's a much better character when you're older.
Yeah, and that's why. That's exactly why. When I was a kid, I did not get it. I did not understand him, didn't understand what was going on. But as an adult and probably, 30 years away from whatever his age is in the film, now I'm kind of like, holy shit, I get grandpa a whole lot more. This is awesome.
I even just love his very last line in the film,
Yes.
Everything he does is fantastic. All right. Well, Sadie, where would you like to start?
I think because I actually just watched it, like I got off social media, I finished all my work for the day, and I was like, I am freaking making popcorn for lunch, and I'm going to sit down and watch this movie again. And so I would rather just go chronologically and just talk about it from the very first time we see the vampires and their sexy mullets, and we'll just go to the end.
That sounds great, as long as you can lead the way.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think we should talk about the soundtrack. We should talk about the fact that this is Joel Schumacher, who is amazing. Mm-hmm. We should talk about the fact that from the very beginning, we realized that this is Santa Cruz. And for whatever reason, they decided to call it Santa Clara. Is that what
Santa
they call
Carla,
it?
For some reason.
Oh, Santa Carla.
Which is even weirder.
I keep calling it Santa Clara myself.
Why did they do that? That first, right off the get-go, everybody in the theater when I saw it, was kind of murmuring and being like, Santa Cruz, Santa Cruz. And then the billboard's like, no, it's not.
Well, and the back of the billboard says murder capital of the world, right? And
right.
I don't know if it was this way before the film, but Santa Cruz is now called the murder capital of the world. And I do not know, maybe one of you knows, maybe somebody out there knows whether that was the case before the film came out or if it's because of that. I don't know, but yeah.
Well, I was watching it with my daughter, just today, and she was like, oh, it's the Santa Cruz. And I said, yeah. And she goes, it doesn't look like Santa Cruz to me in the sense that everybody's so weird. How they do that, thing where they kind of go around and show you all the people, and it's that People Are Strange song. But it is weird. I was telling Natalie, I was like, you were probably just too young to notice, but Santa Cruz is totally weird. There's certain parts of Santa Cruz that you would not want to be caught in the dark, by yourself.
Mm.
Oh, absolutely. All I could think when this started, as soon as I realized, because this was the first time I'd seen it since I lived there, right? So as soon as it started, I'm like, that's Santa Cruz. And then I was like, shit, this is where that little girl goes into the fun house and Us starts as well. What is going on with this amusement park?
Yeah, and it is one of those classic boardwalk, iconic places. But also, I was totally laughing out loud when they show the vampires for the first time, because I remember them being so cool. Just watching them when I was a kid being
yes.
God, they're the coolest people on earth. But then watching it this time, I was kind of cracking up at how cool they are, but they're on a carousel. They're on the kiddie ride.
Right?
Yeah,
it's so odd.
Funny.
And I love how he's harassing people on the carousel. Out of anywhere that you could harass somebody, what an odd choice.
Yeah,
I guess he's she's not going anywhere for a while. I don't know.
Yeah, and their hair is hilarious. The guy from Bill and Ted, that actor, and his curly mullet is horrible.
It's so bad.
He's not cute at all.
Well, we thought we were so cool in the 80s, though, with stuff like that. It was that was the pinnacle. Have the big hair, look have the androgyny that's going on with your hair and clothing, and this kind of rock star look. I did the same thing. As soon as they appeared on screen, I was like, look at that fucking hair. This is ridiculous.
They do look like rock stars for sure.
I do think it's amazing how Kiefer Sutherland is somehow still cool while looking that way. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, he's been cool for a really long time too, if you think about it. He's had a long career of being cool.
Oh yeah. All I could think about though, like rewatching this, because I've seen Stand By Me so many times, right? That's like one of my like top 3 films ever. So I kept getting vibes of Ace the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, this is so weird. He's Ace again, except now he's a vampire.
Yeah. Yeah. He totally repeated his role for this.
So then you have the security officer who's like, I told you guys not to come on here, because this has apparently happened many times before.
Yeah, they definitely stalk this area, especially the carousel.
It's so weird. Like, it didn't seem this weird when I was watching it, but as I'm talking about it, it became hilarious. But yeah, so he's like, I told you guys not to come here anymore. And they just leave. And, you know, they get this like little... That look that he gives security guard when he's walking by him is just so great. Like, it immediately sets the tone for everything, in my opinion.
Well, and then that awesome scene where the security guard later is like walking through the dark parking lot, like to go back to his car. And I told my daughter, I was like, this is so cool, because clearly the director realized that if they showed these vampires like actually flying, it would be a wreck. Like, it would be so bad. Like, you know, the special effects had not caught up to the fact where they could like show the vampires flying. That would be a disaster. So just this like POV of the camera, like, you know that it's the vampires zooming in on them and that on the security guard, and that was so much better than actually showing them flying.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I want to go back just a little bit. It's, you know, just beyond the vampires itself. But when you have Corey Haim or Mikey and oh my gosh, now I forgot Corey Haim's name in the film. But you have the family. They're obviously resettling, and looking at this film from a historical perspective, you can look at this as they're victims of 1980s Reaganomics and the economic recessions that we hit in the 80s, where they're having to relocate and start all over again. And my wife laughed at one line that Corey Haim's character says, where it's like, can we just go back to Phoenix? And she laughed. And I looked at, because, you know, again, I'm laughing at ridiculous stuff through the film, but I'm like, what's so funny about that? And she says, breaking from her laughter, no one says I want to go the fuck back to Phoenix. Who says that? You're going to California, and you, as a kid, you're going to say, I want to go back to Phoenix. And I sit there and try to rationalize. Like, well, you know, they've gone through a traumatic thing. Mom has probably lost her job. They might have lost their house. You know, of course, this kid doesn't understand, which again gets into this weird bathtub situation, because I'm not sure if he's 13 or 8, because of the way that things tend to happen with him, where he's talking about being scared from a comic book, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, but, he does have like an age confusion in the movie a little bit.
But you have this multi-generational family under one roof, where you got the grandfather, the mother, and her kids that are there. And I guess you can include Nanook there, because you always have to have the dog. And spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen this, the dog lives. It wouldn't have worked if he hadn't lived. But you get to see the dynamics of this family that's having to resettle, and the father, or the grandfather in this case, who is part of that greatest generation, and he's been able to build up. He's got this land and everything that he owns outright. He's living his happy retired life, whereas his daughter, who is part of that baby boomer generation, now is being set back and has to move in with her father, and bringing her kids with her as they resettle, and as she hopes to start over. Which again, that's looking at this from an adult perspective. Starting over is some scary shit.
Yeah. Plus, I kind of saw for the first time. I didn't notice this before, but like she had gotten a divorce, and she chose, instead of like a really ugly, expensive divorce battle, that she would just, you know, let go of all the possessions, the house, the whatever, and go back and move in with her dad. Yep. Which is so brave. Like, props to her. And
absolutely.
Also, she got to keep the kids. So for whatever reason, you know, they went with her. And also, like, Diane West is like the quintessential mom she is the most amazing mom in every movie I've ever watched.
Yes.
Like, I remember her in Parenthood too.
That's exactly what I was thinking about.
Loved her in that.
You know, that totally plays into what was going on in the 80s, where divorce was becoming more common. And like the country as a whole had this like panic about the loss of the nuclear family. And, oh my God, what is this going to do to the kids? And I mean, we all turned out fucked up. Wait, hang on. That's not right. Anyway, so
we didn't turn out any more fucked up than kids of the great generation or baby boomers turned out, or the silent generation. I mean, it was just one of those excuses that the new right started pushing in the 1970s, and people like Phyllis Schlafly would definitely shame women for wanting to, exercise their rights to be individuals as opposed to, I don't know, accepting abuse.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, to me, it's always, if divorce is going to be better than the hell that you're putting your kids through being together,
exactly,
where's the choice? Or the hell you're putting yourself through. I'm not discounting that either. But like, yeah, so like the whole country was having this crazy panic about this. And it was interesting to me how it actually helps this story so much to put that in there as well. Because if there was a... well, I mean, for obvious reasons that we'll get to in a bit, you can't have a dad figure there anyway. But if you did, like, it would have just thrown everything off, And I find it amazing how this story wouldn't work without that.
And, even looking back at this period, because this was around the same time my parents got divorced. And looking at it at that period, I looked at those kids as being, I didn't see them as whiny, pissy kids, anything like that. Because I identified with what they were going through. It was kind of like, you got to find your own way now. You got to readjust. And plus, I was a military kid, so I was used to moving by the time I was 10. So when I saw these characters on screen, my thoughts were, holy shit, that's so cool. They're going to live with their grandpa, as opposed to, oh shit, they're going to live with their grandpa, and not seeing it as this moment of despair, I guess you could say, that they're going through and having to readjust. But
yeah, I like how they show up at Grandpa's house and the mood is light and fun, and it wasn't like this heavy thing. There was definitely like some intentionality with the director to just make sure that this family is well adjusted and the dynamic is really loving. Like, I like the relationship between the brothers. I like that they are playful, and the older brother Mike seems significantly older in terms of like maturity, but I don't think that their ages are necessarily too far apart. Like, Mike seems to be about like 17 or 18. And then I think that like Corey Haim's character, Sam, is like, what is he, like 15 or 14? Like, he reminds me of my son, who's 15. I
swear, I feel like he's supposed to be 15, but there's some things that it makes him too childlike. I guess there's some actions and things that almost make you see him as like an 8-year-old character.
But my son,
the typical 8-year-old character.
My son does that too, though. Like, some of those things where like singing in the bathtub and like you were talking about, like bubble baths and stuff. I mean, my son does that too. Like, I still think, even though they're kind of like at that age, some boys are kind of like tipping towards trying to be cool and like going after chicks and like hanging out with certain crowds and stuff. Some boys are still, I don't know. They're not.
I don't mean that as far as the singing bath. What I was alluding to was the way that Mikey said, "Go take your bath," like the way that he's being treated. Because I'll tell you right now, I'm 42. I will jump in the bathtub full of bubbles and sing, and maybe even FaceTime James.
Please don't do that.
I'll send you my Cash App.
So what I like, oh man. So what I like about this juxtaposition of his character is that it's very purposeful. Like, when he's in the comic book shop, he's got his like stylish little outfit on. I say that kind of jokingly, but he's trying to be cool around other peers, right? But then when he's by himself, he gets to be himself. And I really like how purposeful it is. So it didn't really throw me off so much as I thought it was a really cool way to get a lot more characterization of where he's at. And it also it leaves enough of that childhood innocence that mom's not going to believe you when you tell her what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah, which kind of reminds me of like Goonies too. Like the movies all around this time are sort of like the same in that, hey, this fantastical, epic thing that all of us kids are going through, like we're alone. Like our parents aren't going to believe us. Like they're not going to come in and rescue us. Like, you know, what is it that what's his face says in Goonies where he's like, hey, this is our time. Like our parents had their time. This is our time. And that's sort of what Lost Boys feels like too. Like we're on our own fighting epic evil right now, and we're going to kick ass.
Yeah, I mean, the 80s just had this amazing knack. They didn't even know they were doing it. They literally, I have this theory that the reason we have so much nostalgia for the movies that we grew up with was that it was honestly talking about our entire lives. And there was no way we could know that. Because even now, we look at like, you know, where Social Security is going or different things like that. And who do we blame? We blame the generations before us who squandered things or sold us out or whatever else we feel. And the 80s, like Goonies and all that, had already captured that theme. And we had no idea that it was going to permeate our entire lives like this. But we were feeling it at that point. Like, I assume I was very young, but like my friends who are a little older than me, they talk about it. They felt that way. Like the 80s were so about money that mom and dad were working constantly, or they were always gone and you're on your own. Here's a Nintendo, kid. Like, call me in 2 weeks, you know? And yeah, so it's amazing to me how we were already hitting these themes and we didn't even know it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also, before we move on from Grandpa's house, when they're like moving in for the first time and kind of taking in their surroundings, like we can't forget the fact that when he opens up the refrigerator and lifts up that little old fart latch and looks at the snacks and tells the kids, hey, this is my shelf, these are my snacks, there was a box of Boppers in there. And I don't know if you guys remember Boppers, but man, that is a snack I wish would come back for us.
I do not. Don, do you?
I don't recall, but I mean, I had a lot of snacks when I was a kid, and I don't recall
They were like,
I recall Bopper snacks because I remember like the punching bag thing Boppers, but I don't remember like were they like chocolate or something?
It was like peanut butter. It was like inside was like a peanut butter core with like Rice treats all around it. Like
I never had these.
I had them. Yeah, I just Googled it. I've had them.
Good. Yeah, you keep them in the refrigerator, and it was so cold and yummy. And like my mom never bought them, but when she did, it was like Boppers.
I've never had this, but it looks amazing, and I want one now. I'm gonna have to go on a tour of how to make them and make it for myself. Oh,
yeah, anyway. YouTube it.
No, you know, the other thing with this scene is we get the little. They go into Grandpa's little work area. I don't know what to call it, and he's immediately like, "Don't go in there," you know, and like kind of shuts it. And I thought that was kind of weird because it never really goes anywhere. Like I thought it would really play into stuff and
like his den of taxidermy.
Yeah, you know, like I don't know. Maybe it's just showing how weird not Santa Cruz is, but you know, it was strange to me.
Yeah, that was a weird thing. Weird hobby.
I think it was, well, not the taxidermy. I want to go ahead and say that. I don't think it was that bad. Or I think that was just kind of an insight into Grandpa where it's kind of like, look, you guys are moving in here. I still want my own privacy at my place where I'm going to do my stuff. As opposed to some of these other movies where we see, you know, somebody moving in with their parents or their family. And it's like they have no freedom, or at least they have no access to the house other than the bedroom that the parents have given them or allowed them to have, to the point where, you know, they can't even get anything out of the refrigerator without asking. You just see the Grandpa is so welcoming to his family and understanding the situation where it's kind of like, look, you guys can have the rest of the fucking house, just don't touch my car and don't and don't go into my study where I do all these, all my taxidermy.
This would have been a good time for him to say that if you're ever going to steal the car, you should fill it up with gas.
I love how in this movie, the sequence of events kind of does like flip-flopping. Like you kind of are seeing this family settle in and into this new town, but then the viewers also get to watch the vampires like, preying on people, and you know that at some time like this is going to intersect. So
yeah,
you were kind of at the carnival part when the boys are like, oh, let's check out our new digs. Let's go to the boardwalk and watch this like greasy saxophone guy.
Shirtless saxophone guy.
Song. That's like my favorite movie song in the history of the world.
Shout out to my friend Fernando. This is his favorite scene. So, I just had to throw that in there.
Too. It totally sets the tone.
It's the favorite scene for so many people. And what's great about that is I think someone, and this might have been a Reddit thing, but I think someone had the shirtless saxophone guy like made into a little action figure. Like they 3D printed it or something. And of all the obscure things, I'm waiting for someone at Comic-Con to dress up like the shirtless saxophone singer.
Please don't do that, Don.
Well, is he the real singer of the song? Like, I'd never even looked that up.
Oh, I have no idea. That didn't even occur to me to look up. Huh.
Well, we need to Google because I don't know. I don't know. Like the soundtrack is so iconic to me. Like I have like a weird confession just to tell you guys. So back in the day, after I had watched this like maybe a dozen times, I have this girlfriend that we would like watch movies a billion times, like Dirty Dancing and Ferris Bueller and just a slew of movies that we had seen over and over again to the point of like quoting them all the time. And the Lost Boys soundtrack was something that we would like put on in her bedroom. We would dress up in like kind of vampiric clothes, sort of like Star was wearing, these like gypsy clothes, these like, Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks get-ups. And then we would dance to the soundtrack for each other. Like one of us would sit on the bed and then the other one would get up and perform this like, weird dance to this song.
That's awesome.
I can't believe I'm telling this, but it's like long ago in my past that it's a distant memory at this point. Well, I mean, it just goes to show that it's one of those provocative soundtracks that just stick with you. Like I still to this day will like put it on and listen to it cover to cover. Like every song is good. And then Cry Little Sister song is so like, it is the quintessential vampire song. Like if you want to pretend like you're a vampire, you have to listen to that song.
All right. I have an update for you.
Yes.
That was him singing and playing because he's a saxophone player and singer. But, oh gosh, what was the other thing? That was him, of course, singing. He's done in a few movies, not necessarily the shirtless thing. But there is, I guess, a subculture of people who are hell-bent on creating anything related to him in the movie. So there are enamel pins. There's, I'm assuming, maybe Funko made a limited edition pop for him.
There goes my whole paycheck.
I mean, it is really cool, and it's cool that it is the guy.
That's pretty crazy, huh? I did not know that.
Hey, we learn stuff every day, James. Every day.
So then at this point, Jason Patric, who plays Michael, which we have to give props to Jason Patric because I don't really know like what else he's done in his career. I'm pretty sure that this was like the pinnacle of his career. I know he went on and did I don't know if it was the Sleepers movie or whatever.
He was in Sleepers.
Yeah,
yes.
which was good. But I don't know how much more he's done after that. But anyway, so he buys a leather jacket. He thinks about getting his ear pierced or whatever. I think I might be ahead of myself, but he goes on this like dirt bike dare with the vampires. They kind of invite him on this like beachside race or whatever with their dirt bikes and almost dies. Like, which also reminds me of Stand By Me, that scene when that kid almost dies on his bike, in this like male showdown kind of situation. Yeah. So, and then he fights the Kiefer Sutherland character, and then goes back to their hotel. Which, didn't you think it was really weird how Kiefer Sutherland gives this like history of the hotel with like dates and stuff? Like, wow, why would he know that?
Because he was there. No, I don't know.
It's so weird. He was like in 1906.
Maybe he was there. Maybe he's been a vampire that long. I don't
Maybe
know.
he was auditioning for House Hunters.
I mean, 1906 is pretty famous in the San Francisco area, but like, I don't know. It does seem really odd that it's a bunch of useless information, really.
Yeah, I just thought it was weird.
I think I disagree, Jane. I think it was useful as far as the viewer to question like how long he has been a vampire. As far as if it's, this place got swallowed up, the earth opened up and swallowed all this stuff down here. It could be that speculation of, I just want to tell you something really cool about this place. We want to welcome you in. I mean, just like if you invited somebody to your house, you're going to give them the information about, what may have gone. If there's something significant that they need to know about the house, like, oh yeah, we put in a pool like 5 years ago, or, we renovated the kitchen, that type of stuff. That seems to be the attitude he has, or the tone he has when he's telling that. It's kind of like, yeah, this happened, and welcome. Want some Chinese food?
Eat some maggots.
Yeah, it's like a weird hazing session that they give him, where they're like all making fun of him and telling him he's eating worms and maggots and stuff, and doing all these like, performative acts and stuff that make him all scared. Like, it is like a really long hazing session.
The whole thing is weird to me. Yeah.
Well, the weirdest thing about it is how normal the hazing is. It's not some weird vampire shit where it's like, hey, immediately come over here and drink my blood, or let me bite your neck. It's the same type of hazing you would have in any group of friends or any group that you're new to. They're going to bust your chops about certain things. Oh man, what's up with those pants? Are you waiting for a flood? The typical 80s type stuff. So I see it as it's their way of messing with him to see if he's cool enough to actually keep around. Because as Star says later, like, yeah, I was supposed to kill you, but I liked you. So, we decided to bring you into our group. Which,
didn't you think that was inconsistent though? Like, that's kind of a plot inconsistency. Because why are they like bringing him in? Wouldn't he just be a victim?
Yeah, it's weird. The whole thing's weird to me.
Maybe it's an issue because I can't remember if the mom had met the video store owner yet, as far as applying it for, because it was all the same time, right? As far as when they were.
No, that is the reason. We're gonna get to spoilers anyway, so we might as well talk about how Max is Max. But Max says that he wanted to bring her in, so he had to bring the boys into the fold.
Right.
But again, this would be way easier if they just attacked him, right? Like, I don't know. But the whole thing seems so off to me because it's like, hey, let's race. Hey, I'm going to almost kill you. Hey, come hang out with us. Hey, I'm feeding you maggots. Oh, look, they're not maggots. Here, have some blood. Like, none of it. There's no consistency to it. Like, if it was me, I would fucking leave by this point. Like, that part where you tried to kill me with the motorcycles. Yeah. Like, I'm done, like.
But James, let's be honest. Let's look at this as a teenage boy. He's thinking about Star.
Right.
So if I leave, I have no chance with Star.
Right.
I look like a complete punk if I walk away. So if I do challenge David, if I do fight David or stand up to him, at least there's kind of that respect that I might get from him. Okay, we might form our own. I might become part of the group. We might be friends. I might just be able to find some way I can get along with Star, and then we start dating or whatever it is. I mean, you're a hormone-riddled 17, 18, 19-year-old young man.
35, whatever he is.
Yeah, 30. You're looking to get laid. That's what's going on with him. He's like, oh, well, in addition to that, it's also about finding some place where you actually belong. Because, when he can't find a job, when he does go looking for a job, the guy says, hey, there's nothing legal here to do. he doesn't even have that opportunity to go find a job to keep his attention.
Food for thought.
Yes.
Yes, I am thinking about that now. Although he would think it was kind of weird how there was this sort of weird situation where Star was going to go with him on his bike, and then David asks her to, kind of forces her to go over on his bike. So it was this weird, challenging thing where who's the alpha male here? And you'd think he would kind of think they were together, but then later he kind of has an open shot at her. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, that's another part I thought was weird. Like, David borders on domestic violence there with his little Star, get over here kind of thing going on, And then he's just laid back, like, oh, she's our friend. Like, what? Like when they hook up later, Michael and Star, and then the vampires are all coming back. Like, I was totally expecting some kind of confrontation there, or shit, we got to get out of here, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And apparently everybody's just cool with this. So it was another one of those, I don't know, maybe I'm just not grasping what's happening. I don't know.
Yeah. Plus, and then there's that little kid, Laddie, who ends up on a milk carton we see later.
Yes.
In their house, you see him on a milk carton. So he's a missing kid. But also, it's not really clear, what is his role in this situation? Was he a victim at one point, and maybe Star rescued him, and now he just runs around with the crew or whatever? But it seems kind of odd that they would have this child running around with them all the time.
Yeah, right. Huh. That's a really good point. I hadn't even considered how weird it would be to have him there all the time.
Yeah. Well, they're here, Star, this is for you.
That's one thing, but we did the same thing in Interview with a Vampire.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just an issue of Lestat wanted, I can't remember the young lady's name. Lestat wanted the child around because he wanted a companion. He wanted a toy, a doll. He wanted something there. And that was her biggest complaint was, I'm never going to grow old. I'm not going to become an adult. I'm not going to be able to go out and have these things. But Lestat created me so he can have a plaything. And so he just keeps her with the curly hair. She'll cut her hair and it immediately grows back. Yeah,
right. I totally remember that.
Yeah, because he wants her to be his, I guess, his little doll.
Oh, you know what? When you said I'm never going to grow old and stuff, this is called The Lost Boys, which is totally throwback to Peter Pan.
Yep.
It just dawned on me.
I even messaged James earlier. I was like, all right, we're going to be talking about Vampire Peter Pan tomorrow.
Yeah, that interesting.
Or the Peter Pan vampires.
Which, it is a really low-key horror movie. For somebody like myself who never got into the culture of horror movies, some of the cultural references in this movie where Sam talks about, I think he talks about Jason or something Friday the 13th or something. I don't remember what exactly he says, but it was lost on me as a kid because I never watched that stuff. Mm-hmm. But as far as horror movies goes, this was very accessible for someone who was just getting started into horror because there's really only one scene that was really scary, and that would be when they bring Michael out and it's their first kind of kill. They want him to watch them make a kill. And that one is that's really the only brutal scene I think of this entire movie. So it's not really scary.
You probably wouldn't know this because it's not in the film, but apparently the 80s had this thing where they would release paperbacks along with the films, right? So it was books written after movies. And in the 90s kind of did it too, but the 80s did it a lot for some reason. And in that book, the opposing gang is called Surf Nazis. And I think that's such a weird name for your gang. And I have so many questions. Yeah.
Oh.
And so now you don't feel nearly as bad about them, do you?
Yeah, I'm just
you're like, fuck the surf Nazis.
Die, surf Nazis.
Yeah, so I think it's so weird that it doesn't come up in the film at all. And I just have questions did the guy who wrote the paperback, was he just in a weird mood and he was they need a name, they're the surf Nazis? Or was there some crazy backstory to these people that I want to know about?
What do they call those novelizations? Is that what that is?
I think so.
When a book is based off of a movie. Right.
What's weird is there was another movie, and as soon as you said Surf Nazis, I know there's like a B horror movie with that same name, and it's Surf Nazis Must Die.
What?
The
We
same
are just
year.
making all kinds of discoveries today.
The same
amazing.
year. I think it's one of the trauma movies, or I can't remember. It looks too much like any of the Toxic Avenger things, so it might be the same people who did it.
Weird.
I had to look up the year that it came out. I'm like, it's 87, same year as Lost Boys. So
That's interesting.
You know what
I thought
also
that was
is
so
like,
weird.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, I just want to know this backstory. Like, who are these skinheads that surf, you know? Like, that's amazing to me.
They got their heads torn off.
See, there you go.
Yeah. See you later.
there's Sig Heil to balance on the surfboard.
Good God.
Yuck. We definitely have to talk about the Frog Brothers
Yes.
and the fact that this is like the Corys, as they came to be known in the 80s and 90s, were
Yes.
totally a thing. Those two.
I still love Corey Feldman. I've taken a couple shots on him, especially in our Gremlins episode. But Corey Feldman, I have like this lifelong obsession with Corey Feldman films. We're actually doing one next week as well because we're going to talk about the Burbs on here.
Ooh.
But so Feldman is just like this like god to me. Like not Corey Feldman the person, but Corey Feldman the movie person is like a god to me, right? And when I was a kid, like that's who I wanted to be, and I think that's so funny now. But like,
well, he's in all the best movies. I mean, he's
Absolutely.
in Goonies,
Yes.
and he's in this
Stand By
movie, Stand By Me, and his role in Stand By Me is probably my favorite. I mean, it has the
Yes.
most depth of character.
oh yeah. Well, and even in Gremlins, like Gremlins doesn't have without Corey Feldman screwing water on him, you know. So yeah, no, I just. As I tweeted earlier today, why the fuck does Corey Feldman talk this way in this film?
Well, I
Makes me
want to know what you mean, because at first, when I first read that, I translated it in my brain as Corey Haim, because Corey Haim has a totally weird way of talking in this movie as well.
does.
Kind of like this he doesn't do it in any of his other movies later on, but it's almost this open mouth kind of talking where like his tongue is always the last thing to see after he says something. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like he like hangs his mouth open with his tongue kind of sitting there like
Yes. No, Feldman has like this, it's like he's doing an impression of an authority figure the whole time. So he'll be like talking and be like, let me tell you something, son. Like it doesn't
totally
sound
know.
like Feldman in anything else. It's so
I totally
weird.
know what you're saying. He'll say like, what was that thing in the comic book story where he was just he takes that like low tone to his voice too, and he's just like fighting for truth, justice, and the American way.
But even he's like, it's a good thing you called us, you know, like it's so great. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's so odd. And like, if he only did it occasionally, it would probably be funnier to me. And instead it just became like this, why is that how his character speaks? I don't know.
Well,
And
he
now
has
that you
these
mention that
weird
Haim
one
does it.
lines too.
Yeah.
Like they give him all the cheesy one lines. Like at the end of the movie, it's just one right after the other. Like how it'll just pan right over to one of them, and they'll be like, "Death by stereo." I
That's
love
amazing.
it.
Yeah. I don't know. Don, what about you? Did you think that they talk weird in this, or was it totally
I
normal?
didn't think that. Well, the thing is, I've kind of like you. I would seek out in the 80s. I would seek out Corey Haim in Corey Feldman movies, like not Soul. Jason Patrick was in Solar Babies. Not Corey. Prayer for the Roller Boys and License to Drive.
Oh, yeah.
Even some of the
Yeah.
really, really like B-level movies that they both got caught up in the 90s.
Have you seen Blown Away?
That's the one.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that.
I mean, nothing. It was just one of those things. Like it was a very Corey Haim movie. You know, the Corey Feldman movies were very Corey Feldman in the 90s, and but I wasn't thrown off by him speaking like that. I took it as Well, maybe that's why they're calling him the Frog Brothers, because he has that froggy voice. Maybe that's what's going on. But then it was kind of off-putting because in one sense, because why are you trying to put on for this guy who's new to town? You don't have to impress him. And it immediately flips on them to where he's like, hey, if you're going to be running a comic book shop, you can't have these next to these, and you can't have these next to these. You haven't discovered red kryptonite. This guy hasn't shown up yet. This makes no sense. And then you hand him this comic book with vampires, or at least vampires, to at least give him some guidance about the town. Well, not about the town, but to let him know like what's cool with you guys, because we're not reading Superman and Batman and Marvel and any of that stuff. We're reading this stuff because we're men.
Why don't they just tell him?
Yeah, so much easier.
Well, I like the part of, well, I don't even think that they knew. It was just kind of that idea that maybe something's going on. Because the comic book shop is useful for a good number of reasons. One, you've got that interaction between Sam and the Frog Brothers. But then you also have the metaphors, the imagery, all the things that the comic books themselves represent within culture. Whether we're talking about pop culture or even historical culture, because if you go to Superman, you're talking about escaping persecution from Nazi Germany, or if you got the X-Men, you're talking about the civil rights movement and talking about rights of all different types of groups of people. But there's a lot of stuff that can be learned in those that goes beyond, just those general stories as far as the metaphors that they're representing. And it's great that you have that transition from the traditional comic books that people are accustomed to, hey, here's this really dark stuff that can teach you about, vampires or werewolves or whatever else might be out there, and taking it as Superman doesn't exist, Batman doesn't exist, this stuff doesn't exist. But if something did exist, it would be closer to what we're giving you, as opposed to some dude who came from another planet and, is stronger because of a yellow sun.
Well, comic book store in general is really great symbolism. And I don't know that this was done on purpose at all, but a comic book store is basically that gateway between your childhood and your adulthood. And it's one of those things that we cling to as older adults. And I'm not shitting on anybody for liking comics. I'm including myself in this. It is that door back to when I was a kid and I met Spider-Man, or that kind of thing. And so it's a really cool symbolism of transition right there. And it also gives you all of these unrealistic expectations of what masculinity is, because you're not going to grow up to be Superman, and you're not going to probably grow up to be the hero. It's, I don't know. I find it fascinating, but that's my lit crit background, I guess.
No, I really like that. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, it really is like the one-stop place where you can go and you can indulge like childhood fantasies and read, nostalgic comics, or you can read some scary stuff. Like he's just kind of like, hey, I told you I'm not into horror comics. But then later that comic book ends up being like his knowledge base for everything that's going on with his brother. So that's kind of interesting.
I guess it's funny with the whole idea of masculinity itself, because this idea of, I guess, community, whether you're talking about this group of vampires, a family, Sam and the Frog Brothers, or even Grandpa basically rejecting the community itself, it all shows these layers that we see within, different subcultures and subgroups. And I immediately thought of this when I saw David appear on screen, and then he started with his talk towards Michael and trying to make him belong. I immediately thought of American History X, with the way that the neo-Nazis themselves, or even I forgot who the king of the neo-Nazis in that movie was, that was over Edward Norton's character, how they would use these ways of getting people to follow them because they didn't have any other options. And you would see this in gang culture. You would see this with, even organizations like the military, that you have people that go into them because there's this sense that they need to belong to something. Now, this isn't everybody who does it, but there are some people who just feel like there's something I need to belong to. Church. I mean, you start to see all these things that people can gravitate to, for positive or for negative reasons. But the one thing that kind of links a lot of them is this idea of finding a group that you're comfortable with, your own little community, and those lines that David kind of throws in, be one of us. And then, when they're hanging from the train trellis, you're one of us. It's a whole lot easier if you don't fight. You have to let go. Like that whole idea of letting go of what you used to be, or that fear of joining, is so big to me when I'm watching that scene, and that idea that, what do you have to go back to? Do you want to belong to something, or are you just going to keep searching?
Yeah, that's really interesting because Max, as like the head guy here, was probably in some way predatory towards these kids who just kind of like meander around the boardwalk and are lost and kind of don't have the parental guidance and the nuclear family that we were talking about earlier. And so he could kind of, reel them in and make them part of something and make them part of a group. And then, these vampires kind of troll that same area and look for new recruits, basically,
Right.
for him, in that sense, this like gang membership and this family of sorts. And then Max is on the prowl for like a mother figure, because he could probably see that like he needs somebody who's a little more nurturing or something for these kids. And he starts looking at Diane Wiest, her Wiest character. And then it's interesting how you were talking about how, it just takes like one strong person to just kind of see through that whole thing. And in this case, it's Corey Haim's character, Sam. Like, he kind of fights for the family. He kind of fights for like, no, we have a good thing going here. We have grandpa. He kind of scolds Mike. Michael has like this dig at his grandpa, like after he's become like a half vampire or whatever, he takes a dig at his grandpa. And Sam kind of scolds him like, that was rude. There's a difference between how we razz grandpa because he's old and set in his ways, but like we don't like make fun of him or be rude to him, So Sam kind of like sets the precedence for like, keep fighting for his family and keeping them together as a family unit, which is really cool.
Well, you bring up something that I didn't think about before. Could we possibly argue that Max is a benevolent character?
Oh, yeah.
As far as trying to save these lost boys.
Well, I mean, villains think they're the hero in the story, so at the very least, I think he believes that.
Yeah.
No. I mean, going even further than that, like, say these kids had nothing going for them, and he's the one who can offer it to them, and he immediately thinks, villain or not, I'm the one who can give them this. If I put all the pieces together, I can create a good family. Because he when he is courting Diane Wiest, he says, boys need a mother. And even when Sam is blowing up at the video store and getting onto her, or even getting onto him at the dinner, there's that moment where he kind of says, I understand. I'm not trying to be your dad. I'm not trying to replace your dad. I really like your mom. And trying to let him know, like, I'm not here to replace anybody. Now, of course, that's part of his game, but we don't know if that's genuinely how he feels, or if it's part of that lulling to get you to drop your guard so he can then turn you into one.
I think you're onto something though with that, because he has said like quite a few times in the movie, like everything he says, the motivation is always like, ooh, she's really protective. Like there's that scene where all the vampires come into his shop before we know that he's, the ringleader. Mm-hmm. And he's like, hey, I told you guys I don't want you hanging around here. And then they go out and he's like, oh, they're just a bunch of punks. And then she kind of stands up for him like, hey, we were all kids once. Like, it's cool. Like, they're even cooler than we were, and he loves that. Like, he just immediately, like, that's when he hones in on her. So I think
they would have had to have been invited in.
Yeah.
They're inside. They have to be invited in, right?
But that's a store. That's not a residence. Those rules don't apply. It has to be your home.
I see.
Uh-huh.
What about the garlic rule? That
I was
either.
gonna say they do take a lot of liberty with the vampire lore.
I like that. I like when movies subvert expectations in that way, because it's ridiculous to me. Like when I watch a zombie movie, one of the things that pulls me out is that people have never heard of zombies. Like, how do zombies not exist in worlds where zombies actually exist? You know, like,
right.
You don't have any of that folklore. That's weird to me. So, like, when you know about werewolves and you're going up against a werewolf, I like that you think you know what you're doing because of fiction and the rules we've been given. Right. Or like Sam believes that garlic makes a difference because that's what he's been taught. That's way better to me than worlds where you've never heard of a vampire, you know? So I kind of like that they're not overly faithful to it, because it does allow them to, it puts Sam in a weird position, but it also fucks with us as an audience because we do believe in these rules and we think that they're set.
Yeah, I like that too.
But then also makes you question, who's putting those rules out? I would like the idea that there's like a, like with True Blood, when they had their own PR firms for the vampires, like how they would put out all this fake information about vampires just to make people feel a little bit more comfortable as far, or if there was like a mass murder with one vampire, they're like, no, that was an isolated incident. Vampires are peaceful. We don't attack people and drink blood. And then you see them like having a blood sex orgy in the next scene. But I do like that sunlight is the one thing that stays constant in this film, where it is the way that you can eradicate a vampire, get rid of the vampires with the sun, as far as harming them. Because even David, it's very painful when he does have his hand reach into the sunlight, but it doesn't cause any long-term damage like some other vampire movies have done, where, if the hand gets exposed, the hand, bursts in the flames, and then it takes a while for them to heal. For him, it's just like it hurt really badly, like a third-degree burn would.
Yeah.
I do like that added factor where, there is this moment before you turn into a full vampire, to where you still you're tired during the day, but you don't have the same debilitating effects that normal vampires would have.
Well, it really raises the stakes here. Like, if he was already changed, like, what can we do?
Well, I mean, there's been other movies where they've dealt with the head vampire, and if the head vampire dies, any baby vamps that they have become human again, or in some cases die as well. So I don't know. I like having the idea of the half vampire, to where you have no distinction as far as like, he or she can be fully affected by the main vampire. But it also questions, like, wouldn't the half vampires, because they're part of this line, now have some link to whoever the head vampire is? So, why wouldn't Max be able to, I guess, communicate with them or have some control over him? Because it seems as though with the control that he seemingly may have had with the other boys, he should have been able to do that with Max as well, as far as getting him to do certain things, because David was calling out to Michael.
Yeah, I think it's a plot hole, actually, because in the cave in the very beginning, during the hazing process, when they bring out blood, like in most vampire fiction and lore, we know that to make other vampires is usually like you almost half kill them, and then you can make them part of your like coven or whatever by like having them suck on your blood or whatever. We see that in a lot of different movies, like that's how vampires are made. But in this case, they just drink that. It doesn't even look like blood, actually. It's like Kool-Aid. But they drink from that. And is that David's blood or is it Max's blood? That's interesting.
And that's where I was confused, because even Star was saying you drink his blood, implying David, not saying, that it was Max. And maybe that's what they've created, as far as David is Max's creation, and then David goes out and recruits his little brood or crew or whatever it is. And so where there is that kind of disconnection or at least, we set this up like multi-level marketing with vampires where, hey, I bite you and then you bite 5 more people. And then those people bite 5 more people.
Yeah.
No, I had never considered that it was Max's blood. And I think that actually adds a really cool level of why it would be in this jug that you give somebody instead of you forcing it on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, that's a really cool theory. I like that.
Also, I have in my notes here, like I was taking notes while I was watching. I thought it was funny that they had this huge picture of Jim Morrison on the wall. Part of me thinks that they were trying to establish Jason Patrick as like, hey, look, this guy looks like Jim Morrison, don't you think? Like it was almost like, hey, draw the connection. Because there's this part where after he drinks the blood and there's like this faded picture of Jim Morrison in the background and then Jason Patrick like overlaying like his face like right on top of it. And it's almost like the director was like, we picked this guy because he looks like Jim Morrison. That's the point I thought they were making.
I just thought it was weird. It's like, maybe they really, really like him. And then part of me was like, maybe that's supposed to tell you when they were turned into vampires. But I was like, why would you wait this long to find a mother for them? Like, the whole thing was, I don't know, it's weird.
Or here's another crazy theory. Maybe Jim Morrison was a vampire.
It's true.
Think about it. Maybe he was a vampire because despite what, people want to say about, he's buried at Père Lachaise Cemetery in France, he's not buried there.
Yeah. He's eternal.
And
maybe he grew up to be Max.
No, let me tell you this. I went to that cemetery. I would find it very hard to believe that there's any grave there because there's like a tree that's growing off to the side. And maybe he's a vampire and he's out there somewhere.
Oh,
maybe he's the one who turned Max.
Someone needs to get on this Jim Morrison vampire movie.
It's probably already out there somewhere. But if you find it, send it to us. We want to see it.
Okay. Well, you guys do.
Jim Morrison, right. Vampire King.
Yes.
Yes.
We'll just launch a whole series of rock star, like, monster movie stuff. It'll be great. Jeez.
Earlier we talked about, the grandpa figure, or at least the father figure that's there, which, again, I think it's a major oversight that at least, not necessarily in the writing, but as far as a viewer, you don't typically think about. Sam and Mike, they have a father figure, and it's the grandpa. I mean, they have somebody in the house who's there for him, who could probably give him that advice, because, even at this one moment, Sam is so excited to go into town, and Grandpa warms up the Ford Fairlane, which I love because the retractable hardtop, awesome car. Warms up the car, puts it into drive, and this kid is so excited to go spend some time with his grandpa and go into town. And 2 seconds later, he puts it back in park, turns off the ignition, gets out. And he's like, that's as close to town as I want to get. And Sam doesn't fully understand why he's like that way. And it's one of those things that you get with age where you realize, I don't need to go out and do all this stuff. And you see this juxtaposition between youth and age, where he understands, like, I don't need to go and do that shit because there's nothing there for me. It's just a bunch of bullshit in the town. If I want groceries or something, I'll go get them. But I don't need to go to town just to go to town. But then you also have this social side to this guy, which is awesome. Just outstanding to show this man this way. The grandpa has an active sex life. As a kid, I did not get it when I watched it as a kid. When I, was in my 20s watching it, I found it a little funny. Now in my 40s, I look at it, I'm like, this grandpa dude is the funniest character in one of the movies I've ever seen, because of the way that he's able to relate to his grandsons. Because when Michael comes back, he sees him and he's like, guess I'm not the only one who got lucky tonight. And not chastise him, saying like, oh, well, what the hell are you thinking? Oh, these girls are nothing but trouble. It's kind of like he's encouraging him. And when they steal his car to go kill the vampires and they come back, it's like they're carrying a woman and a child into the house, not explaining anything. Grandpa stops him and is like, hey, if you borrow my car, the rule about stealing the car, you got to fill up the gas. And not this moment of, I'm going to yell at you guys, curse you guys out. It's kind of like, yeah, you're fucking kids. I know what you're going to do. It's what I did when I was a kid. Just put gas back in the car. You're seeing these moments where he relates to these kids. He accepts them. Like, he's their dad now.
Well, don't you think that, like, a lot of the stuff that he said and did and the way that he behaved was, like, totally intentional? Like, he knew exactly what was going on the whole time. Like, you're not getting one past Grandpa. Like, right. I think that, that scene where they're like, hey, the widow called, you're going on a date early tonight. You have to pick her up early. He's like, oh, I had a date. Like, he is no fool. Like, you're not getting one over on this guy. Yeah. He knows you're trying to get him out of the house. That's why he came back, and saved the day.
I just made a connection you guys have probably thought of 1,000 times before. But this whole thing is about losing family, right? Like whether it's the loss of the nuclear family or the kids that are missing and how they're looking for a community or whatever else. And family is often called blood, and vampires suck blood. And that's really cool symbolism. And again, everyone else,
cool.
I was going to say everyone else has probably thought of this, but I had like this epiphany moment. So yeah, I don't know. I just had to throw that in there. I was thinking about that when you were talking about Grandpa.
Yeah, I didn't. That's a totally new revelation for me too. The Peter Pan connection and the blood connection, totally.
Yeah, James, I didn't make the connection or think about that connection with this film. So, come on,
yes,
epiphany away, man.
I'm amazing, or as Smee would say on Hook, I just had an apostrophe. Anyway, so I had to throw in a Peter Pan reference.
Yeah, thanks for that.
How punctual of you.
Yes.
You're talking about the grandpa coming back, or at least the idea that he's not falling for the ruse and he comes back. He's only gone, it seems like, 30 minutes, if that. It's almost as if he's got his truck outside. He's like, as soon as those fucking vampires come, I'm ready. Because he has the post for his fence, which you see early in the film. He's got those posts with the sharp ends on his Jeep or his truck. And you only see him put one in the ground to repair a fence. And watching the movie over and over again, you start to see like those posts never leave his truck. They're always there. They're going to come in handy later on. But when he does drive back and what was it? His horn honks like La Cucaracha or something, and which is awesome. He immediately runs through the front of his own house. Mikey pushes Max in front of the post. Post goes right into him and ends this vampire cycle by killing Max. And this guy is so cool. It's not even. In all honesty, the first time I saw this, I didn't think anything of it. A few other times, I had these questions like, maybe Grandpa is like a king vampire and he's getting rid of the competition and he's a daywalker. But he kills these guys, or kills Max, coolly and calmly walks into his own house through the debris, past his family, doesn't say shit to them, goes in the refrigerator, gets a soda. He's like, yeah, the one thing about Santa Carla, too many damn vampires.
Yeah.
And that's where the movie ends. And it's the coolest line that you could ever give after you killed the king vampire, the head vampire of this one group. And your family is just looking at you like, you couldn't have fucking said anything to us?
Well, that's the joke. It's like he knew about this the whole time. And like when he sees Michael coming around with his sunglasses and like, all this mysterious shit, the whole time he's like, well, here come the vampires. Like, I'm going to have to save the family. Like he knows like the whole time.
Like how many times has he had to do this that he's so comfortable with it?
Yeah, he's awesome.
How many people does he know that became vampires? And maybe he should have brought that up when she wanted to move her kids there. Well, he might not want to. We have a vampire problem.
He might have done it because he doesn't know how widespread the vampires are. And if they're near him, he can at least protect them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably that aspect to it as well.
Yeah, and he's just like so classically cool in the sense that like the Frog Brothers have like all these things that they tried that didn't necessarily work, you know? And then what I forget which scene it was. It's probably the garlic and the holy water or whatever. It's like you didn't know that garlic doesn't work, asshole, or whatever the vampire says. And he goes, "What about holy water?" And then pushes them in the bathtub.
Yes,
and he
that
like
was great.
melts, and it's awesome. But like the grandpa, if he knew all this whole time, it's not like he's sitting around being like, "Hey, I'm going to educate you on how to like spot vampires and deal with them or something." He just comes in at the last damn minute and saves the day. Like it's just, he lets the Frog Brothers kind of have their run at it, and then he's like, "Let me show you how it's done."
I just want something like the Marvel extended credits or whatever it is, where he's going through his house and having to renovate or explain to the insurance company like why there are blood and guts in his pipes. And
that would be awesome.
It's like, well, we live here in Santa Carla. You don't know about the fucking vampires? So you're not covered for vampires.
I want that.
Call with Jake from State Farm.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, you bring up two of my favorite scenes that I just want to comment on really fast. Number one, when they shred the garlic and claim that it's cheese. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine how disgusting that bite would be? Like, not even like maybe you love garlic, but you're expecting something totally different and you get all this garlic. Oh, that would be terrible. But also the scene where they fill their little canisters with holy water is probably my favorite scene in the whole fucking film.
Yeah, I love that too.
Like, the way everybody in the church just stops and stares at them while they do it, and nobody does anything. Nobody questions it. Nobody asks them. Nobody yells at them. They literally just watch them do it, and then they leave.
And weren't they wearing like camo? Like, didn't they look all like dirty and gross? And they're just like, "Excuse us." Taking care of some vampire situation.
You got the voice down.
I've seen it so many times.
That'd be a scene that would be so easy to overdo with like people yelling at them or whatever. And it's so much better that nobody does anything.
Yeah, and I love that like Diane Weist's character too. Like she's such a mom throughout this like entire thing. Like that was one thing I wanted to say too. Is like they're at the dinner and like her voice is just so my mom. Like she's scolding them for like pouring water and she's like, "Oh, in your suit. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." And then the scene where she comes back after like they're yelling on the phone and like Michael's like floating in the window and Sam's freaking out on the phone. "He's going to kill me, Mom. He's going to kill me." And she just runs out of the restaurant and flies home. And then everything's fine when she gets there and she sees like the milk jug, pouring milk on the floor. And she's like, "Oh, and there's milk on the floor and you guys don't even bother to clean it up." Like it's so my mother. Like she is the perfect mom of all time. I want her in every movie as every mom ever.
Well, and they left the fridge door open, so now your little boppers are probably screwed.
The whole house.
Ah, man. Yeah, I think we covered a lot here.
We did. We talked so much about this movie. Wow.
No, it's great. I really appreciate you picking this. I've had a couple people ask me about it, and we were going to get to it eventually. But I love that we did it now because, like I said, we're doing another Corey Feldman film next week. We're doing The Burbs. And I love Feldman so much. And I have been in a total depressed mode. And watching films like this has like helped me cheer up a bit. Sometimes we do some pretty dark shit. And I just appreciate you picking this film.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's definitely in my canon of like movies that I've watched 1,000 times. Like I could rattle off all the movies that I've seen over 100 times. It would be like Lost Boys, Labyrinth, Legend, Neverending Story, Goonies. Like the whole like late 80s to like 95 is my jam.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Man. Don, do you have anything to add before we wrap this up?
No, I'm good. I was just thinking, man, I haven't seen Legend in a while.
Oh my God. I was looking for it on like any of the streaming services and I couldn't find it. I was like, please somebody just give this movie to me that I injected in my veins like every day.
Oh man.
I don't want to have to pay for it.
Cool. Why don't you tell everybody where to find you online one more time, and we'll wrap this up for you.
Yeah, for sure. I am on Instagram as Mother Horror and also on Twitter as Mother Horror Sadie Hartmann. You can find me on Goodreads, reviewing books over there, Scream Magazine, that's bi-monthly. I have 4 reviews bi-monthly in there. Cemetery Dance Online under the review section. You can find me at the nightworms.com website on the blog. Usually I'm running blogs over there. I have my own blog too at sadiehartmann.blogspot.com. But Twitter, is definitely the place if you want to chat and engage. I'm there all the time. So Nightworms is our subscription service that I own with my friend Ashley, who lives very close to me. So we get to see each other and pack orders together. And that's our little business. And we are currently closed to new subscriptions and orders for our August package, but we will be reopening for the September package, which is called Fall for Murder. And we are publishing our first book by ourselves. In that package it will be, and we can take subscriptions and orders on the 17th, I think, is our theme reveal, and the following Monday is when we will be open for new orders.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you once more for coming on today, and we hope that you'll be back very soon.
Yeah, I would love to be on again. This was fun.
Awesome. So next week we will have the Janimal, who will be doing the Burbs with us, which I probably mentioned 300 times already because I love Corey Feldman. But until then, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we'll see you next week here on the Necronama.com.